All right, so today we're just starting with chapter 8 and we're looking at the first spread, which is 8.2, which focuses on healthy and respectful relationships. And in this spread today, we're just going to be looking at the different types of relationships a young person can have. The different basically ways we can classify a relationship for a young person, and what is an example of like an unhealthy or a toxic or an abusive relationship. Again, how is that different from a healthy and respectful one? So that's the main focus for today. Alrighty, so before we look into the different types of relationships, we need to be able to understand what is a relationship. Now, obviously, when we were looking at all these topics, and whenever I ask you guys to connect something back to social health and well-being, the first thing most of you guys do is you connect it back to the ability of that person to interact with those around them, the kinds of relationships they have. Do they have conflict with other people? All that stuff is connected to our social well-being. And so relationships are not just important for our social well-being, but they influence the well-being in all dimensions, okay? Spiritual well-being is one of them as well, because it influences our sense of belonging to a community group or to the community. Emotional well-being, people who are in good relationships are happier, okay? Mental health and well-being, people who are in good relationships feel less stress, they feel less anxiety. And conversely, people who are in toxic relationships always feel extremely stressed and extremely anxious. Okay, so obviously we have to remember that relationships do affect all the dimensions of health and well-being. So how do we define a relationship then? A relationship refers to basically a connection between two or more people. So the minimum number of people that need to be there in order for a relationship to work is obviously two people. You can't have a relationship with yourself, obviously. So between two or more people. That's our first distinguishing factor. Okay, relationships can also happen between groups of people. So for example, a soccer coach and his players, okay? Or what's it called? When we talk about school, like the relationship that a coordinator has with her students that she looks after, or a teacher has with her students, the relationships that a doctor has with his group of patients. All of these things basically show us that relationships are not just only confined to just two people, but can actually involve groups of people as well. Okay, now in order to have a relationship, you have to be involved with that person, or you have to be interacting with that person consistently over time. And essentially what that means is it has to be long-term. You can't just be with a person for 1 week and then kind of like not talk to them for like the next 10 years and then say, yeah, we had a relationship, because that obviously doesn't fit our definition. So the main keywords we're looking for in our definition here is that a relationship is defined as the connection between two or more people or groups of people in general, and that it's consistent and that they're interacting with each other over a period of time. It's not just a short period of time, it's over a period of time. So it's kind of a little bit like, we could say it's almost like long-term. Obviously, we know relationships don't last. So friendships, people can fall out with each other. Romantic relationships, people can fall out with each other. The players that are part of a soccer team, once they're done with that particular training club and they're no longer with their coach, they might actually not interact with their coach thereafter. Okay, so again, relationships are not permanent, but a relationship has to be at least relatively long-term to be considered a relationship. Relationships are complex and dynamic. So we came across this word in chapter 1. Dynamic means that they're constantly changing, okay? They never stay exactly the same forever. So basically, when we're looking at relationships, we also have to remember that relationships can occur, as I said before, in a number of different contexts. So you can have what's it called, relationships with, professional relationships in the workplace. Out of work, you might have relationships with, your friends who you see at school. Okay, so all of that stuff basically shows us that relationships are complex and dynamic. Now, like I said at the start, relationships can be healthy or unhealthy. And obviously, depending on whether your relationship with someone or with a group of people is healthy or unhealthy, that will go on to influence your dimensions of health and well-being, as well as your areas of development. And we will be looking at this in depth next week when we look at the impact of healthy versus unhealthy relationships on both health and well-being, as well as your areas of development, like physical, intellectual, emotional, and social development. Okay, so that's basically a quick overview, a quick idea of what relationships are about. Now, the majority of today, we're just going to be looking at the types of relationships that a young person can have. And we focus on the relationships that a young person is exposed to, because the focus of our whole HHD is about relating things back to young people. Okay, and young people are going to have different types of relationships compared to much older adults. For example, an older adult who's already finished school is no longer going to have the opportunity to, have a relationship with a coach or with a teacher, okay, because they're not in school anymore. But you guys obviously going to school, you still tend to have that type of relationship. So depending on which stage of the youth stage you're in, obviously your relationships will be different. Some of you who have already started working part-time, in Woolworths or KFC or wherever, you might already have professional relationships, okay, with your colleagues at work. Some of those might even extend to actually being friendships outside of work. So it's important to remember that whichever kind of, regardless of the young person we're looking at, the kinds of relationships that they're going to have are going to depend upon their lifestyles, are going to depend on the kind of social activities they engage in. A young person who works part-time, for example, will probably have more relationships compared to a person who doesn't work. It's essentially about the kind of social experiences that we are going through. Now, again, if we're talking about another example, like even something like online relationships, we haven't really talked about online relationships, okay? If you're like someone who plays online, who does like online gaming or multi-level player gaming, all that stuff, you might actually start to form friendships or online friendships with people you haven't actually met in real life, but that can still be considered a relationship if you are constantly or consistently interacting with that person. So it's important for us to remember that not all young people will have the same types of relationship or even the same level of relationships, but it depends on their social activities. All right, so let's go straight into looking at the different types. So the first one is family relationships, okay? All of us, even young people, even older people, we all have some form of, relationship in terms of family, okay? They're like basically blood-based relationships where you are related to that person by blood. And in some cases, if you, for example, if you've got adoptive parents or, if you're in foster care, you don't even have to be connected to that person by blood, but you can still consider them to be family. So our relationship with family members, because we are with them for the majority of the time, especially in, the current climate, being at home all the time, you are basically exposed to your family. They're the main people who see you all the time. And so if you've got family members who actually offer you a lot of positive support, a lot of love, care, warmth, and encouragement, you're likely to grow up and you're likely to thrive and become a better person, as compared to someone who lives in a kind of toxic or abusive family environment that's kind of littered with like domestic violence issues or conflict all the time. Okay. Now, a young person, it's not just about the relationship. It's not just about the relationship that a young person has with their parents, but also the relationship that they have with their siblings, okay? A lot of the time, we could say parents are a lot older than their kids and maybe they don't connect with their kids as much. They're not on the same page. But especially with siblings, that kind of affects a young person a lot. So if you've got an older sibling, they might act as a mentor to you and you might tell them things that you might not actually tell your own parents, directly or upfront. So essentially, it's not just about it's not just about the parent-child relationship. Parent-child. Of course, that is a very important relationship, but especially as the young person gets older and approaches their teenage years, it starts to be more about what kind of relationship the young person or the youth has with their siblings as well. Okay, now depending on what type of parenting style the parent uses, the child or the young person or teenager will be affected by that. And so there are a few different parenting techniques, and you can see it kind of follows like a graph. So the ones that are further to the right-hand side of the screen is increasing control. So these two are parenting techniques that are characterized by having by the parent kind of exerting a lot of control. Increasing support is the higher you go up. So the permissive parent, for example, lets the child do anything. They're the kind of parent that you know, the teenager's like, Mom, can I go to this party? Yeah, go, whatever, it doesn't matter. There's no rules, there's no kind of conditions or protocols that they put in place, which can be a good thing, but can be a bad thing as well, if the parent is not setting those boundaries at all. Uninvolved parent doesn't have any control and doesn't have much support either. So the uninvolved parent is simply uninvolved. They do set a few rules because they are kind of controlling, but they don't monitor those rules. They don't offer any kind of support. So these kinds of parents will often say, kids will be kids, you're just going to learn from your mistakes eventually. Like, they don't play an active role. The authoritative parent is highly supportive, and they do closely monitor and set rules. So they might say something like, I care about you and I'll give you the freedoms if you can earn them, but for safety related issues or for your well-being, do what I say, it's for the best. Okay, and the authoritarian parent is like super controlling. They're just like, yep, you're just going to do as I say. No freedoms, no extra support there. Okay, now depending on which type of parenting style is used, that is going to influence what kind of characteristics the young person will develop as they grow up. Okay, now we're not going to say any of these are the best, and obviously you might have two young people who both have authoritarian parents, but one person is more affected by it than the other. So it depends on your own personality characteristics, how much you let these kinds of things get to you, how headstrong and independent you are as a person, all that kind of stuff comes into play as well. But that's all basically what we talk about when we talk about family relationships. The next type of relationships is friendships. So our friendships are something that we carry on throughout our lives. Okay, some people will continue to have friends that they met in primary school or in kindergarten. Some people will form new friends when they get into new contexts. Like when you enter university, you might develop a new set of friends there. Okay, so our friendships in any case are usually based on some kind of common interest. Okay, it can be sports, it can be hobbies, it could just be you like the same TV show, or you listen to the same kind of music, or you like the same kind of video game. Okay, so friendships are usually can also usually be formed based on your life experience. So for example, if you look at your parents, or even if I look at my parents, like a lot of the people that they're friends with, you might realize are people they've known like forever. And, you know, you've known their kids from when they were really young, and their kids know you, and it's kind of like family friends as well. So obviously when we're talking about similar backgrounds, two migrants that might have come to Australia at the same time might form a friendship because they've got a similar background. Or similar life experiences. Okay, so that can be also one factor that influences friendships. A person's friendships can also change throughout their lives. So friendships can be long lasting or short. But regardless, it doesn't mean that you have to be friends with someone for 20 years in order for that person to be considered a very good friend. You could just make a friend like, at the start of the year, and within 6 months, you're very, very, very close to them in a way that you're not close to people who you've known for maybe 5 or 6 years even. So again, it's not about quantity, but rather about quality of that relationship and connection. Okay, because you tell your friends a lot of things. In fact, friendships are one of those outlets where young people will go to their friend and they will disclose information they would never disclose to maybe even a sibling, maybe even to a parent, maybe even to any kind of mentor, coach, any other relationship. So because you're investing a lot of your personal vulnerabilities, your personal experiences, secrets and stuff with friends, when a person does fall out with a friend, especially a young person who's still developing emotionally, it can really wreak a lot of havoc on your mental and emotional health and well-being. Okay, and friends are a really big source of social support. They're the people you go to when you need to vent. They're the people that go to when you need advice, all that kind of stuff. Now, friends can be a good or bad influence, and we learned about this when we learned about peer group in chapter 3, talking about the fact that our friends or our peers can impact us to do good things in a positive way or to do bad things in a negative way. Okay, so we've already learned about kind of that last point there. So that's what friendships are about. Now, online relationships are a little bit different. Online relationships, especially in today's age where all young people use social media, young people do develop a lot of online relationships. They might meet new people through online gaming, through a forum, and a lot of the time now, regardless, it doesn't even have to be just computer games. It could be like, anything. Like you could be on a forum about art or creativity, or a forum about like your favorite TV show. And you might just meet people through there, and you might actually consistently start interacting with them and start chatting with them. And you don't necessarily have to meet them in real life in order for that to be considered a relationship. So obviously there are some negatives that come with online relationships. Again, privacy issues, loss of that face-to-face contact, which a lot of us are experiencing now, not being able to see your friends face-to-face, and cyberbullying as well can be an issue. Okay, a lot of the time people might leak screenshots of things that someone else said to them in confidence, and they might put that on a public forum if the friendship goes south or the relationship goes south. So again, there are a lot of negatives with online relationships. It's important to remember though that online relationships, especially in times when you cannot see your friends, like for example right now, they can increase that sense of connectedness and belonging that a person experiences. And chatting and interacting online can be an effective way to stay in touch, especially when we think about some young people. Not everyone is an extrovert. Some people are introverted. Some people do find social experiences a little bit anxiety inducing. So for these people, being able to chat online with someone else who has the same interests as them can actually be a more relieving way to kind of continue to have social interactions without the daunting idea of seeing that person face to face, okay, if they're like a bit introverted. So yeah, it really depends on the kind of person you are. The next one is intimate relationships. So intimate relationships are talking more about our romantic relationships, basically talking about, these relationships are different from all the other relationships we look at because they do involve emotions like love, emotions like being infatuated with the other person, and when a person is in an intimate relationship with someone, they do want to spend a lot of time with that person. Usually they want to spend a lot of time with that person face to face, because obviously they do have a physical attraction to that person and they want to be with them all the time. So like other relationships, intimate relationships can also be short-lived or long-term. We know this, we see this, people get married and then, give it 1-2 years, they want to break up. Okay, or people have been together for so many years, they've dated for so many years, then they get married, you think they're going to stay together, and lo and behold, they've broken up within 2 years as well. So again, intimate relationships, because you're investing so much of your emotional kind of effort into it, they can be quite vulnerable, okay? And if one person is on a page but the other person is not on the same page, they do say love is blind, and sometimes people rush into intimate relationships without thinking about the consequences, or without thinking about the other person's qualities and whether they're going to gel well together in the future. Okay, now the characteristics of intimate relationships will be different for everybody and will depend on cultural and religious values, beliefs, and social expectations. Okay, obviously some religions and cultures don't allow for intimacy before marriage. Other cultures deem it acceptable and say, yep, that's fine, that's your life kind of thing. Okay, for some people, intimacy is about physical closeness, but for others, it might be more of a spiritual or emotional connection. Okay, so depending obviously on what age you are at, it will be different for you. Alrighty, so the next one is relationships with teachers, coaches, and mentors. So this is, a lot of young people are engaged in extracurricular activities like sports or other extracurricular activities like music, drama, debating, public speaking, all that stuff. So for these people, they might start to have connections or interactions with teachers or coaches or mentors, which not everyone else in that particular school or not every other young person has that same connection with that mentor. So these teachers, coaches, and mentors are important for a young person because they help to build up the young person's support network, okay? And basically they act as a kind of adult figure of support, okay? It's not like having friends that are the same age as you. Teachers are obviously older than you. They have more life experience than you, and they can sometimes provide you with advice that you might not be able to get from a friend, advice that you might not be able to get from a parent. They might be able to provide you advice, okay? So they can also provide you with feedback and suggestions, okay? Especially if you're playing sport, they might give you extra feedback that's specific to the sport that you're playing, or they might give you tips from their own life experience of playing that sport. Now, obviously, teachers, coaches, and mentors who have positive relationships with young people will positively influence that young person's social, mental, and emotional health and well-being. And we'll look at that in a little bit more depth next week. Alrighty. And the next one we look at is professional relationships. So professional relationships are all about, what kind of relationship do you have in a work environment? Okay, so for young people who are starting with part-time work, you will start to form a relationship, professional relationship with your boss or with your manager, okay, or with the person that you're reporting to. So that's a professional relationship, and there are certain boundaries and there are certain ways that you're going to behave, or your manner is going to be different in a professional relationship as compared to a friendship, or as compared to the relationship you have with your siblings or your family members. So again, you guys would have heard, but essentially when we talk about the workplace is just like any other environment. It can be quite volatile and unpredictable. So if you don't have good relationships in the workplace, it can lead to a lot of stress as well and can contribute to work stress. If you've got a manager or a boss who's always kind of like, on your back, always kind of picking faults with what you do, it can make you feel a little bit inadequate, or it can affect your health and well-being. Also, workplace bullying, just as bullying happens in schools, bullying can happen in workplaces too. And so it's important to make sure that if you've got a workplace relationship, if you expect good communication, trust and respect, you need to also be kind of portraying those values and kind of practicing what you preach, in other words. So that's what professional relationships are about. And remember, not all young people start part-time work. So essentially, this is more relevant for the young people who do start part-time work or who start working quite early. Alrighty, so we're just onto the last slide now. So what qualities make up a healthy and respectful relationship? So we've looked at all the different types of relationships, and now we're looking at, okay, what are the characteristics or the words that you would use to describe a healthy and respectful relationship? Well, as the name suggests, healthy and respectful. Obviously, a healthy and respectful relationship must have the key characteristic of respect. Okay, we need to make sure that these relationships are respectful, where the person feels respected and the person feels like they can give their respect to someone else as well. And remember, when we talk about healthy and respectful relationships and how we achieve these, it's a two-way street. Okay, you can't expect someone to trust you when they tell you something and you just go blab about it on your social media, or you just go blab about it to everyone else. Okay, it's a two-way street, meaning that what you get from others, you must give that as well. Okay, so if you get trust, you have to give them trust as well. If you get honesty, you've got to be an honest person to them as well. Okay, if someone is loyal to you, the last thing you would want to do is betray them. If someone is empathetic to you and they always understand how you feel, and for example, they call you one day and you say, oh, I'm busy, I'm really sorry, I can't speak to you now. But, the next day you call them and they're busy, and then you start snapping at them saying, oh, you're always busy, you never have time for me. Well, that's not empathetic. That's you not showing empathy. Safety. So a healthy and respectful relationship is one where a person feels safe. They don't feel like they're going to be the victim of abuse in any case or in any form, whether that's physical, emotional, verbal, whatever. So you need to make sure that there's no sense of abuse there. And equality. So if you've got a healthy and respectful relationship, one person shouldn't be made to feel undermined, or shouldn't be made to feel lesser than they actually are. Okay, we shouldn't be having relationships where someone is belittling another person or making them feel inadequate. Alrighty, so that is basically our qualities that make up a healthy and respectful relationship. And this last slide is just looking at, okay, what is an unhealthy relationship? How do we define that? It's a relationship in which a person is prevented from being the best version of themselves, essentially, okay? And so when you are in an unhealthy relationship, you realize that it's not just kind of like you calling the shots anymore. It's like someone else affects what you do and how you live your life. So sadly, for people who are in unhealthy relationships, they can be victims of feeling uncomfortable, being put down by others, or being put down in front of others, not feeling appreciated, feeling that the relationship is unequal. So you're putting in 100% and the other person can't even manage like 40%. Low self-esteem and a lack of confidence, being embarrassed or being the victim of bullying, all this kind of stuff can lead to an unhealthy relationship. And it doesn't end here. Okay, unhealthy relationships are bad, but they're not like so bad that you're fearing for your life or you're fearing for your well-being. Okay, unhealthy relationships are the middle ground here. worse than unhealthy relationships is the concept of extremely unhealthy relationships, which is basically on the next slide here. Extremely unhealthy relationships are usually characterized by some form of abuse. Okay, so we've got physical abuse, we've got sexual abuse, we've got emotional abuse. If you are in an unhealthy relationship that contains some kind of abuse there, that can actually lead to that unhealthy relationship becoming an extremely unhealthy relationship. Okay, so physical abuse, we know what physical abuse is. It's the use of physical force to harm another person. And obviously there's an intention there to harm that person. It's not an accident. So hitting, biting, kicking, punching, all that stuff. Sexual abuse, so obviously without consent, without any kind of mutual agreement. Emotional abuse is probably the worst, one of the worst types, because it's like, you know, it leaves scars that can't be fixed. Okay, with physical abuse, yeah, you get scars, but emotional abuse is more manipulative. It's a lot more kind of strategic in nature. Okay, so repeated insults, putting a person down. We call it gaslighting. Okay, making a person feel like whatever happens is their fault. That kind of stuff. Okay, so that's basically talking about abuse. And unhealthy relationships are usually characterized by some form of abuse. In fact, what starts off as an unhealthy relationship that doesn't seem all that bad may very well, a few years down the track, become a relationship where abuse does happen, and it becomes an extremely unhealthy relationship. So it's important to look out for red flags there, regardless of what type of relationship it is. Okay, so how to be a good communicator. So these are just some tips, how to be a good communicator to promote healthy and respectful relationships. And this is common sense. I'm not going to go into it in too much depth. From this little box here of how to be a good communicator, I just want you guys to maybe just know any two tips, okay? Not more than that. So obviously make eye contact when you're looking at people and speaking to them. Ask questions in a constructive way. Don't ask questions that attack another person or make another person, like, basically don't be passive aggressive, in other words. Speak at an appropriate volume, speak clearly and slowly. When you're talking to someone, maintain an appropriate distance and respect the fact that some people do value their personal space quite a lot, and they don't want you all up in their face. Show interest in what people are talking about and listen. So a lot of us do have difficulties listening to other people. Okay, it's not just about talking on top of another person, but it's about listening. And use spoken and body language appropriate to the situation. So if, you know, if you're speaking to someone and they, especially when there's a power dynamic, like a boss speaking to a teenage worker, you don't want the boss to be towering over them, intimidating them, or speaking in a really rude tone. You would want them to be respectful and to make them feel at ease. Okay, so learn any two tips from this slide here of how to be a good communicator. And a lot of it is, again, general knowledge. Okay, it's not the first time you would have encountered this information. Alrighty, so that basically brings us, I believe that brings us, yes, that brings us to the end of today's 8.2 spread. So I'll just stop the recording here first of all.